Welcome back to the number one CPDH podcast, you guys. And of course, we are the Common Theory, along with my co-host Kunks and my co-host Rohan. Always great to have you guys here. We have a fantastic video for you guys today. We're going to be going very in-depth on our list for the tournament. And if you guys don't know, spoiler alert, not spoiler alert, we played Malcolm BREECHES. Lead designer on this list was our man Rohan. And we are going to be doing a full breakdown, analysis, cards of what we changed, what we didn't like, what we did like, a full meta breakdown of like some of our matches, potentially like how we feel against certain decks between other decks. But with that said, Kunks, how you doing, my man? Everything treating you all right?
Yeah, pretty good. Got top 4 common cause. Can't really complain.
Not too shabby.
Congrats.
Yeah, outside of that, like, pretty good. Pretty good weekend so far.
Good. And Rohan, how about you, man? How's things treating you?
Good, man. Top 8'd alongside with you.
Yep. We both got there.
Unfortunately, top 4 was just slightly out of reach. Yeah, it was a really good time, really good tournament. Holiday weekend here. Got to barbecue with the family. We ate some pork ribs. They were pretty dank. And
nice.
Can't complain, man.
Nice.
How about yourself?
Oh, I have been trying to get in the pool all weekend, and it has failed me miserably.
It's been a hurricane down here.
Yeah, it has been a monsoon every day. You go outside, you're like, it's beautiful. You go inside, change, you walk back outside, a lightning bolt hits the tree in the backyard. You're like, oh my gosh.
Yeah, my community pool's been repaired for like the last 2 weeks. We just have not found an opening to go.
Yeah, this is the thick of hurricane season, right? Between now and the next like month or so?
No, hurricane season usually is like, what, July until January?
Oh,
June, yeah. Yeah, it keeps getting pushed around here, just depending on like the weather situation we're going through. But
yeah, but speaking of storms,
the memes are real, you guys.
Yeah.
Sorry. Let's hit on Rohan. Let's just start about let's tell them what we kind of changed between the lists and stuff like that. I believe each one of us were only 2 cards different. So we were all the same deck, but we were 2 cards different. Some of us didn't have some of the cards, was what it was. So we replaced these very minuscule changes, and they were cards that were draw card for draw card, counterspell for counterspell, pump for pump, so on and so forth, right? Creature for creature. With all that said, Rohan, please lead the way.
Let's just talk about the differences real quick between your list and what I ran, which I believe you were running
Peak specifically. Yep.
In place of Behold the Multiverse.
Correct.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And
actually, speaking of that, I think that's the one card we all replaced. Yeah. I also didn't have Behold. I had Curate in mind.
And then Trickery Charm in place of
Volatile Clause. Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, because I did not have a Volatile Clause.
Yeah, but otherwise, the lists are identical. The cards that we'll go through and talk about the cards that we changed before we settled upon this particular list. I think all the creatures were the same. I don't think we cut anything here. We still have the Pirate package with Cloud Pirates, Talus Explorer, and Oaken Siren. Sorceries, okay, here's a few. We added Reverse Engineer as another big draw spell. So one of the things that this list wants to do, and kind of echoing back what we talked about in the last episode, is have these big splashy draw spells. It's trying to create an engine, with our pirates, and then really use every card to its peak advantage as possible. So there's not a lot of cantrips. Cantrips that we do have are just like the absolute most efficient ones, or they're doing something else on top of cantripping. There's only 3, right? There's Kit Probe, Ponder, and Preordain. And apart from those, they're all really large, fat draw spells. Compulsive Research, Secrets, Deep Analysis, Lore and Reveal, Reverse Engineer. So we did add in Reverse Engineer as another big draw spell. In Instance, we added Electrickery as another board control piece. Gator, why don't you talk to me about Electrickery? This was your idea.
So one of the main reasons I wanted Electrickery to begin with was because there's a lot of very problematic small creatures in the format for us that if we don't get ahead of them, they'll have the ability to get us off the table, right? And ironically enough, one of the biggest problematic creatures in the format is Ketis. Ketis is terrifying. And this could kill a Ketis. This could also kill some amount of lane untappers, some amount of pingers, some amount. So it can incidentally kill a wide variety of creatures in the format to the point to where I think this can hold a slot no matter what. And the reason I say it can hold a slot no matter what is because if we wanted to replace this, we would have to replace it with something like Breath Weapon.
Yep.
Which Breath Weapon can incidentally kill our own creatures.
Yep.
And that is something with a deck list like ours I would never want to do. So
what's funny, I think in the current state, I agree with you. I think we'll get to changes we want to make later, and I actually think that Breath Weapon does have a place in here. The funniest part about
I do agree with that.
The funniest part about Breath Weapon is that in our game 2, when it was the three of us in the same pod, I was really wishing that I had Breath Weapon in place of Fire Cannonade.
Yeah. But
I also had Fiery Cannonade in that game too.
I'm pretty sure I had it too at one point.
Yeah,
but it's like we're all pirates. I don't think this is gonna work out.
And this is an aside. I know we're doing this deck tag right now, but one of the funniest moments, and probably the funniest and most hilarious moment for me in the tournament was when I get probed you late in the game in game 2, Gator. And you revealed your hand, and I think you had 6 cards in hand?
I had 5 at the time.
5.
At the time I had 5, yeah.
Okay. 4 of the cards in your hand were the same 4 in my hand.
Oh my god. Yeah, so I remember round 2 was like, both of these people are playing the same exact list, doing the same exact play. Because Rowan, I remember when you were like, here's an unruly catapult. Gator started laughing his ass off. He was like, I guess I'll reveal this information. I too have an unruly catapult.
That was weird.
Yep. It was almost an identical game for me and Rohan, very much funny. So yeah.
So funny. Couple others. So Peak. We talked about Peak replacing Behold the Multiverse. I know this was a sort of a last minute call for you, Gator, because you didn't have the Behold the Multiverse with you.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Correct.
The one thing that I will say that I do like about Peak, even though it is a cantrip, it's doing obviously the same thing that like Get Probe is doing. Of course, the difference is that Get Probe is quote unquote free and sorcery speed. But what it can do is when you look at an opponent's hand, especially if you're later in turn order in the table, it's kind of giving you pseudo card advantage, especially if you're like turn seat 3 or 4 and the players ahead of you are playing, especially if they're playing blue or black or even red, and they have control cards in hand or interaction in hand to stop a combo. You can use that to your advantage, right? And I think this deck really wants to do that because you can kind of put the screws to somebody saying, I know you have that lightning bolt. I think you need to use it now because otherwise this person's going to go off. And you get to hold your counters in hand, especially these hyper mana efficient counters or protection spells like Mizium Skin and Intervene, for your own pop-off turn.
Yeah, and I think we saw Peak do wonders during the finals as well. Unfortunately, it wasn't my Peak.
Yes. We added Deduce and Is a Charm. Correct.
Yep. So Deduce, that was also your call. I think it fits in with the sort of the big draw spells. It's like draw 2 for 4. But you want to talk about what else it's doing?
So Deduce is a card that I specifically have been just incredibly high on since it's been printed. The reason it replaced cards like Think Twice, right? It's a lower rate. It's still 2 cards, but 2 for 4 instead of 2 for 5. But specifically the big thing that Deduce allows is it gives you an instant speed way to win the game, right? So if your opponent thinks you're going to win, you slam your Fire Weaver, you slam your Artillerist, you're like, here it is, pass. Your opponents are going to go, wait, you don't win? And you're like, I pass. They may put their shields down, assuming you don't have it. And then as soon as they tap out now, and that's the player you were worried about, you're able to go, oh, I'll respond. Deduce, type changer, win. Yep. It is absolutely insane that this card has been printed and allows you, because it's instant speed, right? Gives you an instant speed line, which the deck never had before. It's very strong. I have done that one time. So it's not something that happens a lot. It's few far in between. But the option at least is still there. and the card is still incredibly powerful. Like, draw 1 for 2. It lets you continue to push, and the investigate is great because it just lets you sit on it until you truly need to pop it.
Having the clue also adds to the Secrets of the Golden City.
Reverse engineer.
Correct. Also assists.
We're not on Thoughtcast here, but I think there's a world where you can build this deck and absolutely include Thoughtcast, and it kind of fits with that as well.
The next one is it Charm, Rohan?
Yeah.
So I offered you this card originally. You said no, and then you came back to me and were like, you know what? I think it does hold a place. So kind of hit us with that one. What do you think?
Yeah, so this is a card that I've been on and off on this list for a very long time. Basically, since I first built it about a year ago, I started with this card. And for a long time, I had it in hand, and I'm like, damn, I wish this card was just slightly better. I wish it was a better version, or a different card, but a better version of it. Either I had it too late in the game, and then it wasn't a good counterspell, or it's, I'm trying to kill something that has more than 2, or all the creatures that make that matter at the table have more than
2 toughness. Yeah,
2 toughness, and it's not doing anything for me. The one thing that I think makes it worth it is the third part there, the draw 2 cards, discard 2 cards, which is really relevant, especially around when this deck wants to go off. The one thing, and I think this showed itself in the tournament, we'll talk about this particular fact at the end as well when we talk about changes to the deck, is that because of Breeches, doesn't really miss land drops. Breeches' special ability is pretty much that. You can boil it down to that. Apart from the combo outlet that it works as, what it's really doing is making sure that you hit your land drops, so you end up having a ton of land in hand. And that's where Is It Charm, I think, really, really shines. It lets you trade those lands in hand that are garbage, that you don't need, that you can't even play, for other stuff that allows you to do stuff. And, of course, if you are in the combo turn, in the non-deterministic Breeches combo line, and you need to continue the storm, this is great for that.
Yeah, because in Malcolm Kedis, when I used to that when I was playing Is It Charm during that storm turn, that was my favorite thing. Just draw 2, pitch away the 2 lands. Yeah, at a faster speed than compulsive research.
Yeah, the card is very strong. Being modal helps a lot. The 2 damage gets overlooked a lot.
It does.
I do believe it holds a lot of relevance now. I think the counterspell aspect of it is essentially non-existent on the card at this point.
It's technically on rate, but
but it's not there.
Yeah,
that kill is a very big deal, especially with Kedis's and Malcolm's and Gretchen style decks with all the little untappers. That 2 damage, that shock is no joke.
Yeah, I think as the meta gets tighter, this card's value goes up significantly. I felt that in this tournament. I think in a tournament that has a huge amount of variance and a lot of, I'd say lower tier decks or not even tier decks, or a lot of creature heavy beater decks, this might not be doing its thing. And I think I've been in that situation a lot, but yeah, I think the meta is changing. I think more people are getting into the format because of more content existing out there and people being able to get access to that content. The meta is kind of shaping up into what we saw in the tournament. That's where this kind of card shines. And I actually felt really good about it in this tournament for the first time maybe ever in my life.
I was very high on it. I saw it earlier in the event as well, and it was fantastic. But let's see these artifacts. I think that it's one specific one. Bonder's Ornament, I believe, is... I'm completely wrong with that. So Aether Spellbomb and Bonder's Ornament.
Aether Spellbomb in here. We added Bonder's Ornament. Actually, I think those are the 2. So those are the 2 that we added in. Yeah, Aether Spellbomb. For me, actually, if I had to pick a card... So first of all, I didn't want to play... I had, once again, another card that I had on my list way back in the day. And then I took it out because I was playing it and I felt like I was forced to crack it to stop someone else's combo turn, putting myself at a disadvantage. And I'm just like, oh, I'm just playing a card and just kind of wasting my mana on stopping someone else's combo turn because I'm being forced into it. And Gator was like, dude, you don't have to do that. If you see someone about to go off and you know that someone else, maybe even if you don't know, but they're likely to have interaction or you have interaction in hand, crack the Spellbomb for a draw before the pop-off turn and then force someone else to use their interaction. And I was like, damn, I never thought about doing that. I honestly never thought that was an option. And I would only pretty much use the crack the draw on Breeches combo turn, just to like fuel my combo, just to make sure I'm not pulling in instants and sorceries to continue the chain. When I use it that way, and it's really just a tool to buy time for us to go off with this deck, it really worked well. And it's literally, that's exactly what happened in game 1 for me. I played a turn 2 Aether Spellbomb, and it stopped all the bullshit at the table long enough for me to assemble my combo, and then I had the non-deterministic. I think everyone was kind of at like half health at that point. It was like 10 to 14 health, 14 life around the table, and that was low enough for me to get my non-deterministic Breeches combo and just like go for the kill, and it worked. So yeah, Aether Spellbomb. I didn't even have to crack it. Actually, it didn't do shit.
That's even better.
It stood there menacingly.
Yeah, that's the super cool thing about Aether Spellbomb. Just players don't want to run into it. I mean, I get it, because sometimes I have to play around and be like, I don't want to crack getting on my stuff. So, Gator, I'm going to borrow your phrase. I'm just going to play into it. Like, if they don't pop it and bounce my stuff, cool, I win. If they use it to pop someone else's stuff, cool, I win. If they use it to draw a card, I'm probably going to die.
Yeah, my favorite part about the card is that I love the chaos factor that the card brings to the table, because I'll play it in the first few turns, right? And people are like, oh, Gator has a spell bomb. He could stop that from happening. And then I'll be like, yeah, but I know you have removal to stop me. And then like 1 or 2 turns will go by, and I see that the table has gotten very comfortable. No one's thrown removal anywhere. And everybody's like, well, that spell bomb exists. I'll pop it. Boom, gone. And people will go, dude, that card was stopping them. You must have interaction. I'm like, sure. I don't. Here, tap out. Here's my board state. And people are like, oh my gosh, what are you doing? And I'm like, sorry, guys. Like, got to care about myself sometimes. And then the whole table is like scrambling, because like their answer, which was never theirs to begin with, is my answer, is now gone.
Yep.
But that's where the other cards like Probe and Peak come into play, where I actually get to see the other player's hands and get to do plays like that with the Spell Bomb. So Spell Bomb is very, very strong. So
cool.
But Bonder's Ornament, I also didn't get to see it.
Bonder's Ornament. This is just an additional rock. It does want to have a rock in hand from turn 1, ideally. That's why we play so many. It's just to get your commanders out faster, to get your game plan going faster. And when we talk about updates and changes, I think we're going to see more of that when we make some edits to this deck. But the other relevant part, of course, is the draw. Basically draw 1 extra card per turn, which is, may not sound like a lot, but it's actually pretty significant, and it's exactly what this deck wants to do. Gator, if you want to talk more about that.
Honestly, I think you hit the nail on the head. It just needs to draw more than 1 card per turn. This does it. It provides any color of mana, plain and simple.
Gator, I think you said you had a pretty locked board state where nothing really happened, and you were just like, yep, I'm just going to draw a card 4 turns in a row.
Yeah, I mean, that's just all the card does. Like, you can beat me to death all you want, but if I'm drawing 2 cards a turn, like, and maybe 3 to 4, depends how much mana I have and stuff like that, the card does its job, does it well, and including the fact that it's an artifact, allows you to use it late game as a combo outlet, which allows you to get the artifact trigger without going to combat to begin with. So it does give a lot of assistance overall.
There's a reason why it's banned in 60-card Poly. All right, so enchantments, Affinity Now is always there, but the new one is Quicksilver Dagger. So it's actually very much like Bonder's Ornament, right? It's doing that same thing. It's drawing you that extra card per turn. It breaks a control board state. But the other thing that's really cool about this is that if you stick this on a pirate or one of your commanders, or on like a Meatboy Changeling or any of the pirates, in the deck, you can immediately go over the top of creatures. You don't have to worry about blockers, and you get to draw a card, and you get to trigger one or both of your commanders, which is
insane.
Right? Pretty insane. Yeah. And if you have if it's also a way to come back from a low mulligan, right? If you can get Breeches out on curve and you're still behind on land after that, then you drop your Quicksilver Dagger, you're drawing cards. So you're hitting land drops, drawing cards, and that can pull you into the late game without, being too worried. Yeah. Also prevents you from looking like too much of a threat, especially if you drop Breeches and not Malcolm.
Also, too, that's kind of like the floor of the card, right? Like the worst case scenario is what you're talking about, right? You're just putting it on like the random creatures, right? But if you put that on any of the creatures that have a effect that say untap it on non-creature spell, like Blister Spit Gremlin or like Thermal Alchemist, card is crazy. Like you're just like, one, you draw a card, I'm going to probe you because I was going to probe you anyways. Untap, shoot you, draw a new card. Now I know what you have, and you just keep chaining and chaining and chaining.
Yeah, you just drew 3 cards for 0 mana.
Yeah,
in that situation.
Yeah, the card is
so crazy.
Very, very strong.
Better.
I mean, it falls into the farming aspect of the deck.
Yeah, better than Ancestral Recall.
Yeah, card is insane.
And I think the mana base is unchanged. I actually did make one change from here. I cut one island for mountain. That's it.
Yeah,
Really,
I think I remember
really
seeing that.
Well, let's go into your new list. If we could pull up your new list through the 3 of us kind of discussing it and going through the changes, if everybody could see your actual updates and see why we're going to be doing what we're doing moving forward. What's the thought process behind it?
Yeah, Gator. In the previous video, we actually got a comment saying why Ash Barrens over certain tap lands. While Rohan is putting up the screen share, do you want to discuss that really quickly?
I mean, Ash Barrens is I like being able to thin the deck, right? The deck at its heart is a storm list. I understand that one land pulling out is not like crazy in percentages and all that other jazz, right? But if you just think about it on a base on the floor, you will be pulling one lane out of the deck. That one lane is not a lane that you will be seeing when you go to storm off. So it does provide a little bit of relevance there for the turn you're actually trying to win the game.
Yep. And I'll add to that. There's not a ton of 1 mana drops in this deck. It's a very curve-based deck. Your curve really kind of peaks around 2 into 3. Having something to do on turn 1 to cycle that, to get something relevant and thin the deck is great. It's great to have that. The other thing is, like, if you're on turn 2 or turn 3 and you are holding up mana for something, at least one piece of interaction, if you didn't need to do that and you can tap out on the end step before your turn, you can use that 1 mana as a cycler for your Ash Barrens. Yeah. So it just gives you more. It gives you the game actions that are ultimately going to help you fix your mana and do all that. But it's another thing you can do. And it's not dead. Even if you just play it, you sort of raw dog the Ash Barrens. Both your commanders have colorless pips, so it's not dead.
Yeah, and it's an untapped source, so it does allow you to continue to curve, which is really big deal.
Yeah, and I think the deck only has 2 tapped lands, one of them being the duel, the other one being an artifact bridge.
So here's a weird one. I mean, let's just look at this as a whole, Rohan. I'm going to kind of steal your thunder. The first card we see is already a change. Literally the first card, man. We're looking at Simeon's Spirit Guide.
Yeah.
Talk to us, man. Talk to us.
Okay, so let's just quickly talk about the weaknesses that we noticed, and then we can talk about why some of these cards are in here. So, Gator and I chatted after the tournament on what we felt needed to happen for this deck, and where we felt like where we felt it was struggling. And he pointed out that mulliganing with the deck, especially if you mulligan down to like 5 or 4, is really rough. And I totally agree with that. It is. The deck needs a lot of stuff. It really wants a rock in hand. It really wants some kind of acceleration. It wants a draw spell of some sort to keep you going. It wants a pinger if you can get it. It just wants a lot of things. So a perfect 7 looks and feels really good. You feel awesome. Yeah. You're like, I'm in control. I can do all my stuff. I can play on curve. I'm set. But if things don't go perfectly right, then your game plan starts falling apart pretty quickly, especially if you have like decks like Malcolm Kedis at the table, which is like, or even Laylor, these sort of blisteringly fast decks that are really starting to do their thing on like turn 2 into turn 3 and like get a lot of advantage. And if you mull down to 4 and you don't have a way to crawl back or at least stop multiple wins, then you're screwed. And that feels really bad. So The other part is what we already talked about is the breeches thing, right? Breeches, I think on paper, kind of looks a little weak. It's 4 mana for a 3/3, dies to bolt. We were comparing it to Kedis, right? For Malcolm Kedis. Kedis is it's easier to cast. It lets you cast it on curve really early. You can get it on turn 1 and get your Malcolm going on turn 2. And then you're like off to the races with like all the mana in the world, right? With all the treasures. Obviously, Breeches isn't doing that. But what it is doing is when you can play it, on curve or early, it's drawing you cards off the top of your opponent's decks, but what kind of card is it drawing mostly? It's mostly going to be drawing you lands. So if you're smart and you go to combat before you play your land for turn, then you can rip a land off of someone's deck, play their land, and now you have card advantage of sorts, right? You have cards in hand, but they're lands, which isn't great. To solve this issue, having more looting cards, allowing you to discard those for other draws, especially in the mid to late game, is really going to put you over the top. Even though it's not giving you the mana advantage that like a Ketis has in the early game, if you can stop Ketis from doing its thing in the early game, then you have a potentially massive card advantage in the mid to late game. We're just pushing that even further. So the changes that you're seeing here are going to do two things. One, they're going to accelerate us faster to get our commanders out sooner, or at least get our game plan online faster, like a Bonder's Ornament, or what we're talking about with the Quicksilver dagger, tapping, grabbing your card advantage sooner. And then the other part is looting away the lands in the late game. So we added some more of those. First thing, Simian Spirit Guide. We've got all the fast mana. So even though I haven't added in all the rituals, it's not exactly a Malcolm Ketis. It's not trying to storm off as hard, especially since we don't have all the cantrips to really fuel that sort of game plan. It's a little different. But it does have all the 1 mana rituals. So you'll see Simian Spirit Guide, you'll see
the Rite of Flame up there,
Lotus Petal, and a Rite of Flame.
Well, let me piggyback off of what you're saying a little bit. So the problem that we're going to have here showing the deck list off is that we're going to have to be jumping around a little bit, you guys. So just kind of bear with us and let us show you a few things. The reason these cards, excluding the Simian Spirit Guide, are so relevant is because the fuel feeds the fire. And the fire we're looking at is cards like Treasure Cruise, right? So previously, like, we weren't doing this thing to where we were dumping cards in our graveyard to fuel the things, right? The reason we want to dump cards is for our pingers. The more we fuel the pingers, the more we fuel the draw spells. The more we fuel the draw spells, the more we fuel card advantage, right? And the card advantage is based upon our Rite of Flames, our Lotus Petals, and how fast we're actually able to get the Malcolms, the Breeches, and all those things in play. So the deck is truly becoming this farming engine, which is what the deck wants to be and what it was at its heart. And the whole philosophy behind the deck was this to begin with. So, I mean, I think the next big card, quote me if I'm wrong, Rohan, is the Archaeomancer.
That's an include that I love, personally.
Yes. Yeah, which is, once again, another redundant piece. Like, a lot of you guys will say, oh, well, Treasure Cruise, you're just going to eat all the cards. You won't. Especially when you're playing the Probes and Peaks and Faithless Lootings and all these cards, which, I'm kind of pushing through a little bit quickly here on some of these cards, just kind of rattling them off.
Yep.
But you'll see that they are all going to intertwine and make this engine and just push Breeches to, let's just say Breeches was like a 5 out of 10. Breeches is now becoming an 8 or 9 out of 10 because we're just powering through. We can now push these cards to their limits.
And also, like, God forbid you actually get more mana off of Rite of Flame because someone else played theirs.
Yeah,
and then your Archaeomancer back into it.
Which we literally saw happen. I literally saw happen in my game 3. Yeah, I saw Russell, the tournament winner. He's like, Rite of Flame on turn 2. He's like, Rite of Flame for 3? And we were like, no. And someone had already played a Rite of Flame. He's like, yeah, it's like each Rite of Flame in any graveyard. So that's a Rite of Flame for 3. And we're like, oh, shit. We're in danger. It was not good.
Oh, that was your round 3, right?
Yeah, that was my round 3, yep.
Okay.
But that was honestly so cool to see. I had never seen that in a game, and I forgot that it had those words on the card because I've never seen it in a Commander game. I've seen it in 60 card, but not a Commander game. That was really cool. But yeah, like we mentioned, Faithless Looting is now in here. Again, looting, it's the best looting card in the game, probably. The only looting card Flashback. It's awesome.
Well, let's kind of, sorry to interrupt you. I'd love for you to kind of explain Faithless Looting a little bit more because, Faithless Looting is one of those cards that people have said it does not belong in 100 card formats. It's not good. Yeah, it's card negative. What I believe, there's a huge reason to play it in a deck like this, which is not many decks who play it. So the fact that it's in here should kind of say something.
Yep. Decks that are refilling their hands with cards that you don't want and you want to filter, Faithless Looting is incredible for. It's a filter. The other thing that, obviously this is not a Madness deck, but if you were doing that, it would be good for that too. And it's an incredible filter. It's the best filter in the game. So when you're stuck with like 4 lands in hand on like turn 7, which is actually extremely common with this deck, it's something that I think I don't know, Kunks, if you felt that playing the list.
Yeah.
But I did. You're like, man, everyone's like, oh, geez, Malcolm Breeches has a full grip. And you're sitting there thinking,
it's like,
yeah, but they don't know.
It's all lands. You don't know this.
I had the same thing.
So that's where Faithless Looting comes in. This isn't a turn one play, probably, unless you have like a deep analysis in hand, then maybe it is. In the late game, it's absolutely incredible for filtering your hand out.
In storm turns. It's
storm
just
turns.
nuts.
And I mean, Compulsory Reachers is doing the same thing, just, in a slightly different way.
Yeah, exactly.
They're very, very, very serve the same purpose. And then, Treasure Cruise is now back. We cut it because we felt that it would just take too long to bring it online. It sometimes, because the deck is holding up cards for most of the game, and you're not really you're not playing a bunch of proactive cantrips that you're not filling your graveyard. So this is really offline until way late in the game. Now that we have, more of these looting cards in play and more of these rituals and things, fast mana that it's going to just get dumped into your graveyard, Treasure Cruise comes online much quicker. The ability to play Treasure Cruise for 1, 2, or even 3 mana, stocks go way up.
Yeah, for sure.
And again, if you get it back with a Chaomancer and get to recast it again for 1 mana,
yep,
even better.
This is gross.
Exactly. I added in You Find the Villain's Lair, which is interesting. It's kind of doing everything the deck wants. It holds up a counterspell for 3. If you don't need it as a counterspell and you want to push through on your next turn, just to have more field and see if you can go off, you can end step, use it as a filter as your Faithless Looting.
Yep.
So it's doing both. It's a control piece, but also a field piece. So it's not dead. You got
one more over there by Impulse too. Yes.
Yeah. This card's so really funny. This is a card that I played in CDH, actually. I played Narset for a while.
Oh, that's funny.
Oh, okay.
and this card is bonkers in that deck when you can cast it for free. But the rate on it is actually surprisingly incredible. But you're sacking a land, right? And any other list, sacking a land sucks. It sets you behind. It's not good. It means that you may miss your land drop by doing that, and now you're really behind. But in this list, you're not missing your land drops. If you can get breaches out and you're hitting a land drops, you probably have an excess of lands in hand for most of the game. And that's where this comes into play. It's also searchable in 2 ways. You can find it with a Merchant Scroll. You can also find it with Drift of Phantasms. There are definitely times where I felt like I was getting beaten up and taking combat damage or put into a situation where I'm like, wow, I'm actually scared that I'm going to take lethal soon. And I had either a Merchant Scroll, or I had actually use your Drift. I'm like, man, if I could drift for just something, for a bounce here, I am so set I would win the game. And now you just have more targets for the drift and more bounce options. And this can be a game ender for, again, certain combo decks. If you bounce both things where they're requiring, or they're predicating their win on having the redundancy, like an untapper. They're like, yeah, I don't care if you kill my one untapper. Yeah, well, I'm going to grab both your untappers. And they're like, ah, shit. You hit both of their land enchantments. It can do that too, because it's not just creatures. It's any permanent or non-land permanent. So I think this is pretty saucy here.
Yeah, I agree. I think it deserves a hell of a slot. So
Yep. And as we mentioned before, Lotus Petal is now back in here. Another thing, Chris and I were talking about, that a play pattern that you see a lot once again in CDH is using these rituals, these 0 for 1 mana rituals to get out a 2 mana rock on turn 1 is really, really huge. And now we have that pattern in here.
Yeah, we can mimic it.
Right, which sets us ahead, really far ahead, actually. It doesn't seem like much, but actually it means a lot. One other thing.
Mystic. Yes.
Yep, so we cut an island for a Mystic Sanctuary. And now that we have more of these discard cards, and we're fueling our graveyard, Mystic Sanctuary comes in, can bring things that we discarded back to hand, or even if we play a big draw spell and we want to keep digging, this is great for something like that.
The other thing that this deck does, which tell me if I'm wrong, so this is my understanding of playing the deck. So unlike Malcolm and Kedis, or maybe some of the other decks of the format, I don't care if my Malcolm dies with this deck, essentially ever. So this is a deck where I'm like, turn 4, here's my Malcolm. and someone goes, kill it. And you're like, okay. Untap, play it again. And they're like, kill it. And you're like, okay. Guys, it's a birds of paradise with this deck. But I understand that you don't believe me, I guess. So it's one of those creatures that it's not a Malcolm deck, truly. It's a Breeches deck. And Malcolm is just kind of there sometimes. Like, I went a whole game. In fact, the match that we all played in, I never played Breeches the entire game. And in another game I played, I never played Malcolm the whole game. So there is just like scenarios to where you could truly just sit on one of them. And because of the cards you draw and the play pattern that you're creating with that game, you need one and not the other, and vice versa. What do you think about that, Rohan?
I agree with that. What's nice about the list in this configuration is that it's really malleable now. And one thing I know you like to say, Gators, is like the highest tier decks need to be able to pivot.
Correct.
And I think when the deck is built in this way, you have a lot of options all of a sudden. You can either be on the Malcolm plan, you can be on the Breeches plan, you can be on the Pinger plan with neither of them. Yeah, so I think before, in the previous version of the deck, which relied on getting all your pirates out, you really wanted Malcolm out early. And you didn't want Malcolm to die. But I think in this version, you can totally sandbag Malcolm and be free to do that and focus on other things, focus on Breeches. People don't really like to kill Breeches. It's not really doing anything. It's getting you land drops. It's not really posing much of a threat other than that. And 3 damage around to one person, not for 4 mana, is not great. But once again, like we said, that's fueling all these other cards. It's now part of the engine. It's much more activated in this version of the deck.
Yeah, because I think in round 1 I did play Malcolm just to go. Well, in case if they hit their edict creature, I'll just sack Malcolm and just go, oh no, what a shame.
Yeah.
No, and then just recast Malcolm, play the pingers, and just go off from there. Like, I had my math set up for that, but didn't happen.
It's interesting. So, Rohan, as you kind of already said, that is my biggest pet peeve. That is what I believe, and I think what has been demonstrated throughout the entire growth of the format. Decks need to be able to pivot. And my biggest gripe about the deck originally was my deck was always slow. My deck always was doing one thing. And if you sat across from me, you knew what I was going to do, when I was going to do it, and how I was going to do it. So I could never surprise you. There's no, like, if you couldn't stop me from doing what I was doing, that's your fault at this point. I don't like decks that do that because you know what's going to happen. I like decks that could do this. Like, now a new play pattern that has been introduced to this deck is you play it the old way. You're like, turn 1, turn 2, turn 3, a Malcolm. But you have the combo in hand with Rite of Flame and Lotus Petal, and you were sitting on it. They tap out because you have a lonely Malcolm, and you're like, okay, cool. Guys, what do you have? I have no land drop, but here, Rite of Flame, Artillerist, here we go, Lotus Petal, Trigger, Trickery Charm, win the game. That is not a play pattern your deck had prior to this. Honestly, in my opinion, it's a hell of a big deal because now we're able to even mimic things to where we go, I have no protection, go for a win. And your opponents are like, counter it. And you're like, okay, Mystic Sanctuary, put Blades back on top of my library. And they're going to go,
yep.
Oh, crap. Guys, do we have anything? And the whole table's like, no, I already used my counter spell to stop it from winning. And you attempt to do it again, right? Yeah. And you're able to continue to push and push and push where this deck may not have had that ability to do before. I think that's one of the things that the whole reason we have even started conducting this experiment and actually developed this team is for these exact reasons. Bringing cards in like Archaeomancer. The reason Archaeomancer is here is exactly what we've already stated, right? Redundancy. I want 2 Treasure Cruises. I don't want 1. I want 2 Blades of Velas Fails. I don't want 1, right? And so on and so forth. Yeah. Let's just keep adding and adding and adding to where my deck becomes so redundant. How are you supposed to stop me at this point? Franklin, any last closing thoughts? What do you think of the deck overall now? Do you like the changes? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, with all the changes that we made to it, it's starting to mimic Malcolm Caddis a little bit more in the initial speed that Malcolm Caddis had. Because before, with the current version that we registered, the fastest we could put out Malcolm was probably turn 3.
We could, with a rock, we could at least protect it, but I mean, that's
which was great. I actually love that play pattern a lot because I think in one of the rounds I had Everflowing Chalice for 2, or Everflowing Chalice at 1 charge, and then just play that out as like a Mind Stone. So I was like, oh, cool. Here's a Malcolm. I have this ball in hand. Here's a Breeches with a Dispel in hand. If you guys want to do anything about it, all right, I got counters up.
But now we have that twice as much now, right? Because that we still have the rocks, but now we also have the Rite of Flames. So we're actually able to produce, like, maybe I'm wrong with this statement, but I think like a turn 2, turn 3 Breeches seems kind of crazy. Just to start
what can
pushing.
People do against a turn 2 Breeches?
Yeah, like
the best, like, pray to God you won't get hit by a Necros Marauder, and I think you're fine. Even if you do, cool. There's a Malcolm backup.
yeah, well, exactly right. If you're paying for the higher CMC commander, why does it matter that you lose it? Malcolm is going to get the Breeches back in the game, so you're able to pivot from one to the other. So, I spent all my resources in the Breeches. Well, Malcolm is less resources to cast, which you could just push all that, untap, play the Malcolm, use the treasure, put the Breeches right back in play, right?
Yeah.
There's so many really neat play patterns that you're actually able to create now with the deck. I'm about it. I'm very excited to see where we continue to take it and where you end up with it, Rohan. Any closing thoughts for you?
It was a joy to see you guys play my deck, and an honor. It was really sick to see you guys do the thing, and not only play it, but play really well and see it in the top 4. Felt really good. It was like really, really validating. I'm like, all right, yeah, the deck has got legs, and you know, and then having that much data, you know, from the tournament between all 3 of us to really put into it to make changes that are super effective. And it's not just me, you know, trying to figure it out on my own. It feels really good, and is really, really cool to see. And I'm really excited to do this, you know, with other decks and see where we can take them and see how we're, like, ultimately we're pushing the meta, you know, by doing this with some of the best decks out there.
And guys, if you don't know it already, if you're not part of our Patreon, please join our Patreon. You guys are able to submit lists to us from the Patreon, and we will play your list in the tournaments. We'll actually try to call you guys out, pick your brains, see what you guys are talking about with the decks and whatnot, and kind of go from there and really help us kind of try to succeed with your guys' list and whatnot. But with that said, Franklin, take us home.
So if you're not already subscribed, please hit the like, please hit the subscribe button, click the bell to get notifications for whenever we go live. When the videos go live every Monday morning at 10 a.m. We have shorts that go out every other weekday at 6 p.m. in the afternoon. We're on TikTok, Instagram, Spotify, if you're listening to us. Hello. Join us on our Patreon. The link to our Discord's in the description. So for the submit a deck list, I believe that's a $50 tier, but we all have lower tiers for it, from $1 all the way up to $25 and $50. Hope everyone had a great Labor Day weekend when we recorded this. After that, enjoy school, enjoy life. Right? Take care, everyone.
Later, you guys.
Yeah.
All right, you guys. Welcome back to another episode of The Common Theory. And I already fucked that shit up.
Bro, we got another.
I literally just talked about it 30 seconds ago, and I completely fucking slipped. Force and habits. All right.
Here's a shout out to all of our patrons: Eric Christopher, Aaron, Dax, Devin, Rohan, Little Rat Lotad, Kunks, and Scoob. Thank you everyone for all of your support.